True Crime with host Rich Vernadeau. Tonight's episode features Nights of a Florida Cop, a true account of Glenn Jensen and his work as a police officer in St. Cloud, Florida, with your host, Rich Vernadeau. Nights of a Florida Cop. I was walking my beat as a patrolman in St. Cloud, Florida, one summer night, the same beat I walked every night. As I approached the post office, two elderly ladies approached me and pointed to an intoxicated white male who was urinating right there in public, in front of the post office. I approached the drunken male and told him, "Raise your hands into the air. You're under arrest for indecent exposure and public intoxication." At this point, the drunk male suddenly took off running in the direction of a bar. The fleeing drunk was operating under a misconception that many quite sober people also share. The misconception that a law officer cannot follow a fleeing suspect into a place of business. Under this false premise, the drunk darted into a bar. I followed him inside. Under Florida law at the time, this was the 1950s, a police officer was permitted to use deadly force to effect an arrest of a fleeing or resisting suspect. The drunk turned and took another swing at me, and I instantly clubbed him on the head with my service revolver, the handle of it. With the force as it hit his skull, there was splattering blood from his scalp, which splashed all over his white shirt and onto my uniform. At the same instant, the gun discharged. It went off, firing harmlessly into the air. But the intoxicated man immediately thought he had been shot because of the massive blood. "Why, you son of a bitch, you shot me! You shot me!" he yelled, taking more violent swings at me. By this time, all the patrons of the bar had crouched down behind tables and chairs in order to protect themselves as they became spectators of the incident. Under Florida law, if I ordered any one of them to help me subdue and arrest a suspect, they were obliged to obey me and aid me in effecting the arrest. Yet not a soul in the bar even attempted to lend a hand. Ducking the poorly aimed punches of the drunk, I wrestled him down to the floor on his stomach in order to cuff him. As I would pull one arm up to cuff it, the other arm would flop back down. This went on for a short period of time, and the man was still bleeding profusely. The wound was actually superficial, but the volume of blood made it appear considerably more serious. When at this point, as I was still struggling to cuff the suspects, two men walked in whom I instantly recognized as former officers who had been dismissed. They moved to my bleeding suspect. "Take those cuffs off him. This man's going to a hospital," one of the guys said. It was at this point that I realized I had been set up, that the drunk had been planted on my beat and put up to resisting me. In short, that the whole affair had been a setup. The two ex-policemen carried the bleeding drunk out and laid him on the edge of the sidewalk outside, leaving his head to drain blood off into the gutter. As the minutes passed, the blood that was gushing from his head ran down off into this little watery gutter, creating a horrible scene for the public. That was the idea, and that was part of their plan to discredit me and raise public sentiment against me. I attempted to refute them and told them he was under arrest and that I was going to carry through with taking him to jail. I knew that the wound was superficial and that these men had no authority whatsoever to interfere with my lawful arrest of this man. But as I stepped outside, a huge mob of agitated citizens had formed. The mob was being stirred up and agitated by an old enemy of mine, a wife-beater who had it in for me because I had arrested him numerous times. He stepped forward towards me, and I backed up against a brick wall. I had replaced my service revolver in its holster by now, but I reached down to it and planted my hand firmly on the handle of it. "Jensen," the man took his finger and drew an imaginary circle on my chest. "I'm going to go home and get my gun, and I'm going to blow a hole through you right there." He left, and I stood there staring at the agitated mob. At this point, another very familiar face emerged from the crowd, none other than the mayor himself. "Give me your badge, Jensen," the mayor demanded. I stared at him, then told him, "You realize you're engaging in malfeasance here." The mayor barked back, "Either hand over your badge, or some of these men here will help me take it from you." He pointed to the crowd. At this point, outnumbered and with angry sentiment fully against me, I handed the mayor my shield and told him, "Fine, take it. I hereby resign from this department." The mayor took my shield, motioned for me to leave, and held his hand out to motion the crowd to back away. "Let Jensen through," he ordered. And I walked away. That was my last night as a police officer in that city of St. Cloud.